Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your Fulham podcast from Down Under. Here today for the first time in quite some time to discuss a few transfer rumours. We're going to be back in the off-season to try and give you as much Fulham news as possible. And joining me tonight, we have Sammy. How are you going, Sam?
We're back. Look how fun this is. It's been a nice little off-season. I still think this is technically the off-season, isn't it? This should be like the off-season. This is
Big
like...
time.
This
Everyone's
is like
on
I don't
holiday
know.
in Dubai at the moment.
Yeah, we're playing Villarreal right now. We're sunny. It's on the coast, although it's freezing here where I am. It's gross. But yeah, I'm good.
Good stuff. And Dad, how are we going tonight, Elton?
Yeah, that is me. Fine, thanks. It feels strange. Feels like ages since we potted. Out of rhythm. Semi into cricket mode.
Yeah, it really does feel like a long time since we potted. It's only been a couple of weeks, I think, but yeah, it feels like forever, which is kind of nice to know that coming back to it is on the cards. And like I said, we're hoping to try and put as much content out there during the off season as possible. Obviously, it's tough with not a huge amount of Fulham news, but there is some stuff to discuss today. So let's get straight into it. First of all, Sammy, I'll throw to you. Now that the season's over and we can sort of actually reflect on our accomplishments, how are you feeling knowing that we've finished 10th in the Premier League after so many years of yo-yoing?
Oh my goodness. Okay. It's just it's a relief. It's calm. I don't know. I mean, I was talking to like my Chelsea friend the other day, and it was just a nice kind of smug conversation, and I really relished in that, like to just finally have the shoe on the other foot. And it's just those like little small luxuries, and just every now and then hearing like pundits say, "Oh no, Fulham are actually pretty good," kind of thing, and just in the most obscure places, like on Newcastle podcasts, and just in general, it's just. Like now it's kind of gone past the are we a passing fad? It's like, no, we're actually getting our credit now because the season's over. And it's really, really lovely. And now we're just into the chaotic transfer side of things. And that's anxiety inducing and stressful and all that other stuff. So yeah, in a whole new stage now.
I agree with you there. It's the little things like, you know, the excitement of waiting for the Premier League fixtures to come out. It's something that, you know, each year you're sort of like, oh, wish we were doing that, sitting in the Championship, and then it happens and you're like, oh, let's see which team's going to beat us and how bad our run-in's going to be and how we're going to possibly survive. And this year it just feels a little bit different this off-season because we're a Premier League club. We know that. We've managed to survive one season. It at least leads you to think that we should be able to survive a second season as well. And again, the little things, like I'm thinking to myself, looking forward to actually playing Fantasy Premier League next season because we're actually going to be there for the whole year. Dad, Same question to you. Having a chance to reflect, does it feel a bit surreal last season, or are you just looking forward to next season?
Look, I think I'm totally in the mode of absolutely enjoying what we've done, and I think it's this can be fleeting, you know, over the course of a lifetime of following a club. This can evaporate very quickly for the likes of us, and it's not lost on me, and so I'm truly enjoying it and just relishing the memory of it. But I'm also very keen to push on with this, and I've sort of got some anxiety that somehow, even though we're everyone knows that we need to push on and we're capable of doing it, that maybe the Khans might get distracted and just not throw the toys behind this.
Oh.
It's a good point, and I agree there. Both of you have both said there's a bit of anxiety coming into this off season. I do totally agree. There's a lot of things we did well this season, but in being quite critical of ourselves, because we had the ability to be quite critical because we've ended up finishing so comfortably, we were able to actually look at what we did badly as well and not focus too much on it. But I think there's a lot of gaps in this Fulham team that need to be addressed, and I think this off season is going to be one of our most important. You know, we've talked about off seasons in the past where we're trying to get promoted and doing everything we can to strengthen the squad. And you know, we spend 100 million one year, we come up again and do it differently. We come up previously and do it differently as well. Like it's really trying to find the balance. And now we've sort of ticked the box of get promoted and stay up, but the next step is actually stay up, if that makes sense. Even though we've stayed up once, but it's actually to turn ourselves into a mid-table team that stays in the Premier League for a long period of time.
Yeah. My a lot of my anxiety now actually comes from, like, because obviously there's transfer rumors floating around of potential incomings, and I have just completely just almost given up on speculating as to who would be good in the side, because at the end of the day, I have trust in Silva as a manager, and I also just know that he sees things in players that I just don't necessarily see. So with all the players that are potentially linked to us now, I don't see how they fit, but I have to have faith in Silva that they will fit. And then that kind of gives me anxiety, because then I just lose control and I can't check their FIFA stats and really get a good idea of how it works, you know? So, yeah.
Well, my anxiety starts with possibly the biggest signing that we should be doing, and that's Marcus Silva, because I know that his very public condition of moving forward is to be given the resources to push on. And, you know, is the reason he hasn't signed the main reason? Well, sorry, is the reason he hasn't signed is because the money is not guaranteed. And if the money's not guaranteed, sure, we're up in the Premier League next year, but and you know, even if we didn't sign a single player, we might overperform again, and we might end up in mid-table again. Who knows? Possible, but I don't really want that to be us, and I don't think anyone wants that to be us. I'm just uncomfortable with Tony Khan's love of wrestling.
honestly, this time of year, as much as the Premier League, this is the time when I want a camera in. And this for me is like the peak television show. I want to see the politics that's going on, because we're just totally in the dark. It's just all speculation right now. And this is like the Succession series that I want to see of all, because it's all just speculation. We don't know anything that's going on really behind. Like, there's little bits of information, but we don't know. And that scares me.
Look, there's a lot floating around at the moment, and there's a lot to consider, especially as a Fulham fan. One thing I will say, though, is over the last couple of years, I think Tony Khan and his team have actually done a really, really good job with their recruitment. We look at, I think, and I saw someone tweet it, and I'm really annoyed that I can't remember who it was, but what they said was the recruitment of players in the last, maybe say 4, maybe even 5 years has been really, really good. The recruitment of managers over that time has actually been quite poor, because we haven't had a manager until Marco who can actually get the most out of a set of players. Imagine if Silva had Anguissa and, you know, players of that kind of ability, Anderson, Areola in goal. Like, these are some seriously top-class players, and I think Silva would have got a lot out of them. Imagine having Anguissa and Palhinha in defence together. How unbeatable we would be, and having Ream and Anderson. Like, you know, we've had some really good signings over the last few years, and I think I hope that, firstly, because of the implications of FFP, we have been hamstrung for a while since that £100 million transfer window a few years ago. I think that is in the past now, and so we're actually going to be able to open up the wallet a little bit more and potentially bring in some more exciting signings. Plus, on top of that, I expect we're going to see some outgoings, which we'll sort of discuss a little bit on this podcast and in a couple of future podcasts as well, because this transfer rumors series, I guess, will be multiple episodes over the off season where we'll just touch base and see where everything's going. But I expect we could easily have 100 million plus to spend in this off season. Hard to say exactly, but I think it's a high possibility that we're going to have money to spend. It's just about if we spend it wisely and if we retain the players that make up the core of this side. I'll flick to. I've only got a couple of slides here. I'll flick to the first one, and it's something that was announced about a week or so ago. Just the fixtures. Sammy, when you saw the fixtures come out, was there anything that in particular stood out to you?
Honestly, not really. I mean, I don't really believe too much in good runs and bad runs. At the end of the day, the Premier League's so competitive that you go into it just knowing that you're going to have to play all these teams twice. So yeah, you can have a good start, but I mean, at the start of last season, I can't even remember how it went, but I know it started with Liverpool, then went to Wolves, and then who was following that.
We had a pretty tough start to last season.
Yeah, but we did really well. So at the end of the day, this is Silva's third season. He's really established now. He's going to have a full season to a full preseason to potentially build up some youth players and build up some new players into the squad. And that's all you can really hope for, in my opinion. To be a new manager coming in mid-season, that just messes you up. I feel like last season was the best example of that across the Prem. So yeah, it's just a fixture list to me. Yeah, that's just kind of how I see it.
I don't feel the same way.
Good.
To me, if you look at the importance of that first game against Liverpool, how we jumped out of the blocks, how well we performed, we really sent a signal, and it is all about how you start for a mid-team table for anyone, but particularly for a mid to lower table. How you start is enormous. So I'm kind of still back at the transfer window anxiety that, one of the things that, regardless of the players we have signed, Jack, one of the criticisms surely has to be on a commercial level that we don't land these players early. We try to optimize these deals and get wonderful signings at great value, but that doesn't help the start of your campaign. And that makes life really difficult if it takes you 5 or 6 games to get going, and then eventually you start, picking up a few points. That's big time. Big time. It's a big difference between 10th and maybe 15th, 16th, frankly.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I agree with you. I really think one of the biggest things that Fulham need to focus on this year, and maybe we will because we are officially Premier League, and we knew that fairly early, but we need the players in early. We saw last year, I can't remember the game it was. I think it was the Wolves game, and we looked back on the team that we played in that Wolves game, as in the 11 players we put out on the pitch. And we were fielding Tyrese Francois, Jay Stansfield, these young guys who did a pretty good job at the end of the day, but we hadn't signed blokes like Willian. And Dan James is a squad player, admittedly, but we brought in a lot of people after the first 3 games of the season had already been played. Then it takes them, some guys take some time to settle in terms of their fitness because they haven't been training preseason because they know they're out the door anyway. So it'll take them maybe a month until they're up to full match fitness. And so really by the time they're ready to play and they know the system, it's October, November, and you've actually lost a massive chunk of the season already.
Well, that to me is not good business. Seriously.
100%.
You might pick up a player for a couple of million because you really, really nickel and dimed on the deal. But at what cost? You've given your manager no chance on day one of having a full firing squad. And I reckon that's worth millions and millions in terms of, if you want to measure that in terms of your final position, the table, I think it's worth maybe tens of millions.
Yeah.
I do think that part of the reason we nickeled and dimed and potentially took a bit longer on some of those deals is because we were coming up to the Premier League and we hadn't survived on the previous 2 attempts. And so you do have to be a little bit careful about your spending and be a little bit smarter than maybe some other clubs can be. Like Chelsea, for example, just splash cash and don't even care how it looks and what kind of deal they structure. But we had to be a little bit more careful. We probably don't have to be quite as careful now. What I will say about the fixture list, I remember Cottage Analytica and a few other people basically saying, Fulham were expected to pick up a point a game. And so if you break up this fixture list into 3-game blocks, you need 1 win out of every 3 games. You look at those first 3 games, you probably pick up a win against Everton. The next 3, you pick up a win against Luton. The next 3, you pick up one against Sheffield United, and so on. There are little tough periods in there, like playing Brighton, Man U, and Villa. There's one where we play Arsenal, Chelsea, and Everton. Another one where those are flipped. And then things will change slightly as well, because some of these teams will be in Europe, and we will see some matches delayed, and there'll be cup games that'll push fixtures around the place. So there will be some changes to this. But I think at the end of the day, if you can just keep rolling along at a point a game for the whole season, you should be absolutely fine. And looking at that list, I can see us doing that. My only issue is it's a nasty little run-in, having to play Newcastle, Liverpool, Brentford and Man City in your last 6 games. Is just a bit... You don't want to be fighting for relegation at that point, because some of those games will be massive 6-pointers and they're not going to be easy.
Yeah.
I think I get your point about that statistical analysis, but to me, that is only technical analysis of picking up a point every 3 games, because it doesn't work. Sorry, 3 points every 3 games. It doesn't actually work like that. You're going to pick up 3 points against teams that are statistically weaker than you.
No, of course. But what I'm saying is you just have to try and stay on that trajectory. Obviously, you'll fly above the line and then you'll dip back under it and jump up and down through the season. But if you aim to try and get that sort of result and stumble your way to 40 points almost, I think that's a really good way of looking at it and breaking this list down, because a lot of people have said it's a very tough fixture list and there's not many opportunities to get a good run of fixtures going, because it is important. It's form, being able to win 3 games on the bounce. If you look at this fixture list, I can't see a point where you win 3 games on the bounce, really.
Momentum is enormous, right? For someone like us, it's huge. I guess that's why December or sort of Christmas, that period, just happens to be about the sort of halfway point in the season. And that's kind of when you've got a reasonable sense, because you have played every team once-ish and you kind of know. But I agree with you. You have to find a little patch where you can establish some momentum. And if you keep coming up against monsters, how do you do that? Very hard. Very hard.
There's a lot of monsters in the Premier League, though. That's the only thing for me. It's like kind of impossible to get around them.
100%. It's a tough league, and you look at all those games. I don't think there's many teams that you would just discount and go, yeah, that's 3 points. Even this season, we saw it. There were some pretty average teams playing this year in Leicester and Southampton, but I don't think we ever booked ourselves a guaranteed 3 points against any team this year. Apart from maybe when we did our tipping and actually decided that we were going to win every single game this year, but that's a different story.
That is actually one thing as well, before we move on. That is one thing that, going back to our very first point, I am slightly annoyed that the Premier League has now become a guaranteed 7 teams have massively inflated finances in comparison to all the other teams, because there's no other league in the world where that is that. And in any other scenario, we probably would have been top 6 if that wasn't for that case. But say la vie.
Yeah, hard to say, definitely. But I agree. It's obviously annoying that there's a top 6 that are very hard to break into. We saw it even with the fact that Liverpool had a terrible start and were languishing, but their quality did shine through eventually. But then again, you could say Chelsea would normally be considered one of those top 6, and they dropped off the perch. You look at Leicester; they won the Premier League 6-7 years ago, and they've now been relegated. Like it's nothing's a definite in the Premier League apart from Haaland probably scoring 30 goals again.
Well,
apart from that, I think there's very little that's locked in.
Spare a thought for French teams trying to compete with PSG, or Spanish teams trying to compete with Barcelona and Real Madrid. You know, there's stupid. Well, at least there's. It's a bit lopsided because there are 6 very, very strong clubs, but you know, it doesn't feel way, way, way off for the top 10 to be getting a result against those top teams. So it's not too bad, really, realistically.
It's the most lopsided is actually in Germany, where Bayern have won it every year for the last 10 or
years?
12 now, I think.
Yeah. Apparently they had a really poor season as well, and it was literally Borussia Dortmund.
They won it on the final day, I think. They beat Dortmund, lost, and they won to win the league on the final day.
Yeah, after a really poor season, they still won.
Yeah.
Scottish Premier League.
Yeah.
Yeah. At least there's 2 teams there that fight it out every year. It's a bit more interesting. Let's have a quick look at the announcement that came out late last week with the Fulham release list. So the departing players who, at the expiry of the contracts, will be leaving Fulham. So let's sort of go through them one at a time. Firstly, Joe Bryan, obviously a bit of a Fulham legend for his goal against Brentford in the playoff final. But Sammy, are you disappointed to see Bryan leave, or do you think it's time?
Do you know what? I'm actually not blasphemous as that might be. Really like Joe Bryan, really, really like him. But I have a lot of closure. Like he's given us moments. He's given us a lot over the 3 years that he's been with us, and it does feel right now. Like I feel that Robinson has fully taken on the mantle and run with it, for lack of a better word. And yeah, it feels right that this is the time when Joe Bryan leaves. I mean, you can obviously make the case that he could totally be in the squad, and I think that's valid. But it feels right, and he's given us enough, in my opinion. So there's no love lost there, and yeah, it feels right. It feels nice, and it's like ending a really, really long relationship. You just leave with closure. I've got plenty of closure, so I wish him all the best.
Dad? It does feel right, but I just had a thought there. You know, if I had the option of Kazawa coming on to replace an injured or tired Robinson versus Joe Bryan, I'd pick Bryan every day, even today.
Yeah.
Even though he hasn't played in the Premier League for, I don't know how long, I'd pick him every day. But it does feel right. I think he doesn't fit. He's not quite up to the ambition of this team. And he's been a fantastic servant. He's been part of some really great moments. Like Sam says, I completely wish him well. I think he's a good egg.
Is it weird to say that he deserves to start? Because I don't think he should be playing second fiddle. And I don't even really want to call it second fiddle, but I feel that he should be starting wherever he is, and I want that for him.
Look, he definitely doesn't start. The question will be, is it a smart move to release him when we're potentially, and we'll talk about it later, but potentially selling Robinson, or at least there's some interest in Robinson. So if Robinson gets sold, because the interest is coming from Man City, and Man City have money, probably offer a very, very good deal for Robinson. I heard 30 million touted. If you sell Robinson for 30 million and you release Duffy and Kazawa's gone back off after his loan is expired, we actually have no left back and no backup left back at that point. So that would be my only thought about maybe it was not definitely the right decision, but I also agree. I think Joe Bryan is probably not Premier League standard, and he should be playing first team football every week. He should be starting because he's a good enough player to play in the Championship or for a lower end Premier League team. But I think it's probably the right decision. Shane Duffy, Dad, there's not a huge amount to say here. Duffy only made a handful of appearances. He looked very good in the FA Cup, I think, but apart from that, it was obvious that he was there as a bit of a last resort, and we fortunately didn't really have to call on him that much through the year.
Look, he was there very tactically to plug a hole, and I guess he's done his job. I don't think there's any great surprise that he's moving on. Even his loan to Permanence earlier this year. I don't think no one read anything into that other than the fact that it enabled us to change the balance of our loan ratio.
Yeah.
So look, good luck to him. Seems like a lovely bloke.
Yeah, I'd have a drink with him. That's probably where I'd leave it.
Gazzaniga leaving. This is an interesting one because I reckon we're probably going to see Rodak walk out this summer. As I say walk out, that makes it sound a lot more dramatic. I think Rodak is a similar sort of player to Joe Bryan in that he should be playing first team football. He's a good enough keeper for definitely the Championship and potentially, again, another lower end Premier League team. But when he's sitting behind Leno, you're just not getting a shout. And if your Rodak's age, I can't remember. I think he might even be 30 now. He might be a little bit younger than that, but I feel like he should be playing first team football. Sorry, he's 26. So he's a Slovakian international. He's playing international football, but sitting on the bench for Fulham. Like it just feels like a bit of a waste of his career almost. That might seem a little bit over the top, but I see Rodak moving on, and I see Gazzaniga being released. Again, it begs the question: are we releasing too many players here in a position that we're now having to strengthen in the off season? Sammy, your thoughts on Gazzaniga being released? Would you like to have seen him hang around for another season, or do you think again right decision?
Yeah, in a word, no. I think and I don't even mean it as a slight. I think when he played for us, we were a means to an end for him at that moment. I don't think he ever really fully invested in the club, and can't ask players to invest in the club if they're not invested. And I would rather see him move on for somebody better. I know he's had a really strong season in La Liga, but yeah, best of luck to him. See ya.
Ted?
Well, when we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that was pretty much my view. That I know he's had an outstanding season. There's been lots of really, really good chat about him, and I wish him really well. But I'm not interested in having him back. I didn't like what I saw last time. I thought he looked really disorganized, and I felt really anxious when he was actually standing between the sticks. I really did, and I don't even want to see someone like that as a backup. Rodak I think is a pretty good backup, and I get the point that players have an eye, well, more than just an eye on their career development. I don't know that it's perfectly reasonable to say, oh, he's playing international football, and therefore he shouldn't be on the bench for a Premier League club. You know, Slovenia, where is he from? Slovenia? Is that right? Slovakia. Same. Well, it is. But
all Yugoslavia, I guess. Yeah, to clear that up for the listeners.
If you're playing international for Fiji, then you'd probably be pretty happy to sit on the bench in the Championship. So it all depends on where you think realistically your sight should be set. And I guess the question is Paul Gazzaniga a potential Premier League keeper? I would doubt that. So, is Rodak a potential Premier League keeper? Well, he probably is, but in the very lower end of the Premier League, I would have thought.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think he's up to the standard to be a Premier League goalkeeper. He's obviously done it in the past, but he's always been a backup keeper for Premier League teams. And look, he's got a lot of experience, and sometimes you do want that around the club. But I'd rather us bring in an old head like a 38-year-old. I can't remember who it was who was being touted. It could have been Mignolet or someone similar that we were looking at.
From Everton, I think.
Possibly. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
yeah, so I saw something just very, very late today.
Like a 38-year-old keeper, basically. Someone who you bring in and they understand that they're there to sit on the bench, and that's basically all they're going to do.
Let's get Schwarzer back. Why not? Just
I was just thinking that.
Well, I mean, that's what Schwarzer did at Chelsea. Chelsea couldn't convince a top-tier keeper to be a backup keeper. Thank you, Steve Reynolds, on our live stream, just saying it's Asmir Bergovic, who was keeper at Stoke for many, many years. So not Bergovic, but sorry, Steve, misspelling there. Asmir Begovic. Thanks, Black, White, and Fred.
What's the bloke at Man City as well? He's like Carson or something like that. He's like 40 or something. Yeah, he's not playing. He's not played at all. But he's won like 5
premierships to be a training partner. And that's kind of what you need. And we saw Schwarzer went to Chelsea and did the same thing. A lot of keepers, when they hit a certain age, they go and basically sit on the bench. Peter Cech basically went to Arsenal to do that and then became Arsenal's first keeper because he was just that good. But yeah, look, I think Gazaniga's it's right to release him, and I'm interested to see who we do pick up in the off season, because with Gazaniga leaving, and I think Rodak probably leaving as well, I think Leno needs a more experienced keeper to be backup for him. I don't think you can leave it to Ashby Hammond, who would be the next youth player, I guess, in the Fulham setup. The last of the sort of ex-first team players being released, we got Steven Sessegnon, obviously the brother of Ryan Sessegnon, who left us a few years ago. Dad, your thoughts on releasing Sessegnon? It's been, I think he tweeted and said it's something like 14 years he's been at Fulham, so a big change for Sessegnon, but he hasn't really been in the plans for quite a long time.
Yeah, I, on a personal level, that must be a wrench for someone who's been at the club since he was, like 6 years old or something crazy?
Joined in 2008, so he was 8 when he joined the club.
Yeah, there you go. So, that must be, I mean, he's grown up there. That would be incredible for him to be moving on. Plus the fact that he's obviously, been there for a huge chunk of that time with his brother, who is his twin brother. So that would be an emotional separation for him. But honestly, we're discussing Joe Bryan at length, and obviously Shane Duffy's played decent football and has kind of proven himself to a certain degree at a level. But to be fair, Steven Sessegnon has not. And if we're talking about discussing, whether or not Joe Bryan could or could not be a backup at left back, Steven Sessegnon is way off the pace, to be really fair to the guy, not being being nasty to him, but in terms of moving forward, I don't think this is putting our plans at risk.
Going back to the original point that I made with Joe Bryan and closure before, this one actually probably hurts me the most, because this was the one where it could have been poetry. It could have been really, really interesting. It could have been a great story, and it just wasn't meant to be. And it just kind of makes me sad, because I really liked the narrative of, Ryan's gone off, but we've still got Steven, and he's got an injury right now, but maybe he can rise up. And it just never accumulated that way. And that leaves me with a bit of a sad face, but is what it is.
Yeah, look, I think it's always sad. A player who's been at the club for 15 years in total leaving. It's a sad moment. But at the end of the day, he played 14 games for Fulham back in the Championship in 2019-20 season. Since then, he played half a season with Bristol City in the Championship, half a season with Plymouth Argyle in League One, and then he performed really well for Charlton this year. I think he was right up there with their Player of the Season vote. And they're obviously playing in League One. He made 38 appearances. He's 23 years old. He should be making a lot of appearances at that age, especially when, you know, you're obviously well thought of. He's got a lot of England youth caps to his name. He's a talented player. He's just not getting the opportunities, and he's not going to get the opportunities at Fulham. So I think it's the right move for Sessegnon, and I'm sure it wouldn't surprise me if Fulham offered him the opportunity to stay at the club, because I bet you he's not on a very high wage. But I think he and his team have probably made the decision that it's the right thing for him to leave rather than to just keep going out on loan to different clubs. And maybe it's time for him to make a name for himself at a Charlton or at another team down in League One who are, you know, pushing for promotion, and maybe he can get back up into the Championship and, you know, be like some of those players at Luton who have pushed from League One players all the way into the Premier League because they find a good system and they find a good team and stick with it. So best of luck to Sessegnon and to all of the players who we've mentioned so far as well in their future endeavours, because obviously they'll always be remembered as Fulham players, and it's always hopeful that we see them go on to bigger and better things. The rest of the list, we have Thorstein Antonsen, Sonny Hilton, Ziad Kesh, Jonathan Page, Murphy Parker, and Jean-Pierre Tihi being released. Obviously, all youth players. Sonny Hilton, I think, made a couple of cup appearances for us. I do believe he was actually captaining our under-21s team, so wouldn't surprise me if he has also made the decision to go on and try and chance it at a League One, maybe even a Championship side as well, and try and get his career kick-started, because I think he's about 20, 21 at the moment, so good opportunity for him to move on. In terms of players who are out of contract but have been offered contracts, now we haven't heard any further news on either of these about how the negotiations are going, but contract offers have been made to Neeskens, Cabana, and to Willian. I'll start with Neeskens. Sammy, obviously he had a pretty horrific injury this season, and we saw a little bit of him at the very end. Do we think it's a good deal offering Neeskens a new contract?
Attachment aside, I'm actually not sure. I think we do have a bit of a reputation of holding on to players maybe a little bit longer than we probably should, in my opinion, just out of pure attachment. I really like Cabano, but I was thinking about this in Pokemon terms the other day. Bear with me. If Willian is Blastoise and Solomon is Wartortle, I think Cabano is Squirtle, and I still really like Squirtle, but I'm not going to pick Squirtle over Wartortle or a Blastoise. And so do I really want to prioritize it? I'm not sure. That's my pitch.
That pitch only works for those who know Pokemon.
If you don't know Pokemon, then what are you doing here? You know?
Well, we just had one person drop off the live stream, so they obviously don't like it.
Well, you know what? You weren't supposed to be here anyway, and that's fine.
I actually think Cabano surprised me. I really wasn't sure whether he was going to be able to step up, and I think he looked. He was starting to look really interesting. Not the full package, but definitely pretty handy. And on his day running at defenders, I think he was a handful. And then, of course, the injury. I was actually amazed that he actually even came back, and got back into the side before the end of the season. I think he's clearly Premier League level. There's no doubt about that. I don't think that's in question. Whether we've got quite a lot of winger type options. We
That's
really
the
have.
thing. Yeah.
But none of them are kind of dead set, 100% fit 25-year-olds who are the full package. It's a bit of a
neither
mixed
is
bag.
Cabano.
No, but it's what I'm saying. He's part of that mixed bag, and until we sign two absolute jets at left and right wing, I think Cabanas has a role to play, and I love him around the squad. I think people, I think he's good vibes, and I think, yeah, I'm very very happy that we made an offer to him. I'm really happy about it.
Look, the
I think
reason,
he's very entertaining. I think he's really
yeah,
entertaining as well.
look, the reason why I referred to him as Squirtle is Squirtle's great. Everybody loves Squirtle, but is it the best business decision? I'm not 100% sure. And you know what? I would love to be proven wrong. Prove me wrong. That'd be great. I'd love to see Cabano score like 3 or 4 goals next year, but I'm just not. I'm just not sure.
Look, you got to keep your Pokedex full, Sammy.
Wacky races. You've just shown your age there, Steve. I'm sorry.
What I agree with a comment on a live stream here from Black, White, and Fred. Cabano is playing some of his best football at the start of the season. Think the length of injury has made people forget this. And look, Cabano was one of our best players. And admittedly, this is before Willian signed as well. But Cabano was starting pretty much every game before his injury. And he was looking great. He was so tricky on the wings. And I just remember thinking, geez, this almost looks like a completely different Neeskens than we're used to, because we know he's good, but he just looked like supremely confident, running at defenders, taking shots, putting in crosses. Like, I loved the look of Neeskens at the start of the season. It was a real shame that he got injured, and I think the signing of Willian almost overshadowed how good Neeskens was, because Willian was just even better. And I think it's a worthy risk to take on Neeskens. I could have understood if they released him, but I'm glad they stuck with him, because I think he could surprise a few people, and he adds a lot of depth in the wing, considering as well. Actually, let's talk about that now, considering the fact that there's actually no news here on Manos Solomon. Fulham didn't make an announcement on Solomon. They also didn't make an announcement on Dan James, but they didn't make an announcement on any of the loan signings. So we're assuming Dan James is going back to Leeds. We're assuming Kazawa's gone back to PSG and Suarez has gone back to Arsenal. But the Solomon deal was a little bit more complicated, and there's been no news, no announcement on it for some time. There was a lot of rumours going around that he'd be joining Tottenham, and Tottenham had made an approach for him, and Shakhtar then said they would sue Tottenham, which was a bit of Twitter beef that was flying around at one point. But if Solomon doesn't sign, and then you also have Dan James leave, our wing depth does take a bit of a hit, and it would also be sitting in the back of Silva's mind going, I thought we were fine going into the last season, but then I lost Wilson and Cabano in the first few games, and we were screwed. So offering a contract to a player like Neeskens, who's probably not earning a bucket load, and giving him, I wouldn't have thought it's any more than a 1-year extension, I think is probably the right call. And then on to Willian, Sammy, you know, one of the top 5 players of the season, as voted by Fulham fans. I don't think this was ever in question that Fulham were going to be offering Willian an extension.
It's not even a long conversation for me. It's just yes. Yes. Yeah.
Dad?
Oh, I've been out there saying he's my most exciting player. I've enjoyed watching him above all. I love what he brings to the side. I love his, not only his experience, but just his class. And I think he brings ambition to an invention, and he makes players around him probably play in that kind of Latin Brazilian style. I believe that. And so I love having him part of it, and I think he's a really good person around the squad as well with some of the younger players.
You know, Dad, as well.
So,
oh no,
yeah,
sorry. I was just going to say, on that note as well, the thing, because I can think of 3, if not 4 moments last season where he did this. Willian, it's not even like a Brazilian thing. He is just that Champions League top quality bit of class, and he knows how to essentially set a standard when he's playing for other wingers like Harry Wilson and Manuel Solomon to follow and go, no, this is what we do now. This is how we play. I know you're tentative, but I am just going to do it for you. And then you follow me. And he's amazing at doing that. He just leads by example, and I love him for it.
Well, I think if you wanted to think in terms of just those two players, I feel like Harry Wilson was probably inspired by Willian more than maybe Solomon was. Well, that's probably a little unfair
100%.
on Solomon because we didn't see enough of him. But if there's any criticism so far of Solomon, is that he probably lacks a bit of variety in his play, and he kind of he's got a certain style, and he's pretty awesome when that comes off. But in terms of Wilson, he looked like he kind of unshackled Harry Wilson where at the moment where he needed to. So yeah, I'm delighted. I'm delighted. I'd give him 2 years. I'd back him.
Me too.
Yeah, I think realistically,
I'd have him on one leg.
Realistically, it's going to consistently be 1 year deals that we'll get out of Willian. I think he's probably in the same boat where I'm sure he's teeing up retirement at some point. He loves playing football. He loves living in London. He loves the area. So I think that's going to keep him around to as long as possible. It's just a matter of if he, come the end of next season, goes, actually, I'm kind of ready for a rest now. But I'm sure if he continues to perform like he did last season, we just keep signing him up over and over again. And look, I don't think it's. I don't know the details of his contract. I don't think it's a massive payday for him compared to what he would have been on in the past. But he seems very happy at Fulham. I don't know if you guys listened to the Fulham Fix episode with him, but
yeah, I did.
He loves the area. Yeah. He loves living in London. His family's happy. He's settled. He just seems like he's very content where he is. And so while that continues, I think Fulham will just keep signing him up because he's obviously top class. And even when his pace starts to drop off, I think he's still going to be an absolute handful for defenders. He showed it this season. He's not the same Willian from 10 years ago, but geez, he can cause a lot of damage. It's kind of crazy listening back to that as well, hearing the fact that he played against us when he was at Shakhtar in the Europa League, which is 14, 15 years ago. And he was at the very top end of his game back then, and he's still going.
It's crazy.
But seriously, Jack, he's so skillful that even if he lost 1.5 yards of pace, he would still be deadly.
Oh, for sure.
He would be.
Well, he already kind of has. And like, I feel like he's going to keep on losing pace, but you can't lose class. Like, you can't lose that touch. You can't lose that instinct, that his intellect and his intellect, his composure. He's just top drawer. He's just top drawer, man. Pinpoint accuracy. He's amazing. I love him.
The other three players who were offered a extension or have been offered contracts after becoming out of contract players: Luciano Di Aurea Henry, Stephen Parks, and Devon Tanton. All defenders playing for the under-21s, all had pretty good seasons with the under-21s who had a very good year. So obviously there's a bit of talent being spotted there. It'd be interesting to see if any of those three end up with the first team squad next season, because we did release quite a few youth players. So I think that wraps it up. There's a few other players who were offered contracts. Let me just have a quick look. There's 1 year extensions for Eban Bowett, Jay Williams, both defenders, and Martial Godot as well, who's a striker for the under-21s. So there's a bit of talent in the under-21s team who played very, very well this season. It'll be interesting to see if we do promote a few of those guys through into the senior team this year. Might have been too much of a risk last year, but maybe now we can actually put a bit of faith in some of those players now that we're building a bit of a better spine. Let's have a bit of a chat now about some rumours floating around, and I'll just throw a few of them out there for you guys to comment on. The first one is the fact that Tosin Adarabioyo has basically come forward and said he wants to leave the club this year. I think we all sort of knew it was coming, and Tosin really did see Fulham as a bit of a stepping stone. He had a really good season, and I think he's obviously off the back of that now gone, I'm ready for a new challenge. He's still very young. He has 1 year left on his contract, so we could keep him for another year, but then lose him on a free, or potentially cash in on him now. Dad, I know you've been bit hot and cold on Tosin over the last, say, 3 years. How do you feel now that we might have seen the last of Tosin in a Fulham shirt?
Oh, you're right. I've been very critical of Tosin, certainly the last, the last 2 or 3 years for sure. He's frustrated me because I think he's talented, but there are some big gaps, and I think he's kind of loose, oftentimes loose in defence. He gives the ball away, and I think he takes high risk in trying to be creative and inventive, and that always kind of worried me because I don't think that's necessarily part. Well, it's really handy if your centre back can deliver that, but if you can't do it with high reliability, it's a bloody massive liability. Um, I I kind of feel with and then in the back end of this season, I think he's really improved, and I've actually said so, and I'm happy to have actually commended his performances because I think some of his performances, particularly when we were in a difficult position with Ream having uh, sort of dropped out through injury, he needed to step up, and he really did, and he played with great aggression, and he was commanding in a couple of games. But I always have the feeling with Tosin, and I said this to you guys privately, I've always had the feeling with Tosin that he actually thinks he's more of a complete package than he really is, and and I think there's a disagreement on that between Marco Silva and the team and Tosin, and I think I could smell that tension all along. And so, if he doesn't, I suspect it came down to because my understanding is that it was offered to him to be part of the team or part of the future, and he's obviously asked for more money. That's surely the way it's gone. He's asked for more money.
I actually don't even think he's asked for more money. I think he just said, I'm just not interested in signing a new contract. That's what I don't know the inside word on it for sure, but my understanding is he's just said, I'm ready to move on and I want a new challenge. I don't think there's, I mean, maybe there is an amount that Tosin might take, but I don't think there's much of an opportunity to turn it around.
I thought they did have a conversation and there was a dialogue and they couldn't come to an agreement. That was my understanding.
I think that was midway through last season, and I think things have changed now that the season's done. He's basically made up his mind.
Okay. Well, okay. In that case, I'm going to change my answer. If you're not interested in being part of it, ciao.
Yeah, I kind of echo the same sentiments. I mean, I said as early as the start of last season that I think that he could have gone. I thought he was potentially even going to go in the transfer window, as in like the mid-season one. I think particularly this season more so than any other, he's kind of had one foot out the door, so to speak, and yeah. Going forward, I think we can't really afford to have somebody who's not necessarily 100% committed. The team just doesn't work if people aren't committed. It doesn't work with the way that we play, and that can seriously bring us down. Yeah, like I felt very differently about it this morning. But yeah. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah, look, I agree. If a player doesn't want to be here, then there's no point in keeping them around. I think it pulls down the whole mood of the changing room. Like if if we keep Tosin for the rest of the season, knowing that he's leaving already at the end of the season, it's a very big risk, I think, to the culture of a team. It doesn't seem worth it. And look, he does seem like he's a little bit of an outsider. You look at, there's a bit of a core group there of Pereira and Kearney and Willian and the guys who you always see on the stories on Instagram and Snapchat, and they're all having a laugh in the change room and having
just learn Portuguese, Tosin. Stop moping, all right? Just learn Portuguese.
Even with Harrison Reed and
Yeah.
Decordova Reed and those guys who just all seem to be a very tight knit group. And Tosin just feels fractionally on the outside of that. And maybe that's because he had made up his mind that he was ready to move on. But look, I think cashing in on him now
Jack,
and picking up. Yeah, go on.
well, what do you think? What do you think is at the heart of it? Do you think it's a personality thing between him and Silva? Do you think because I mean, we're 10th. We've had a storming season. Um, Within a couple of years, there could be European football. God knows, spend a few $100 million over the next few years, there could be Champions League football. I don't know.
No,
I'm not
I
saying
reckon.
it's happening.
Well,
What do
I
you think?
reckon if that happens, Tosin drops even further down the pecking order. I
Yeah.
think he probably wants to be playing more regular football. Tosin is how old is Tosin? He's in his early 20s. He's born in 97, so he's 25. He's sort of a couple of years off his peak. He needs to be playing every single week. He's been with Fulham for 4 seasons. 3 seasons now. He's played just shy of 100 league games. He should be a little bit closer to probably 120, 130, 150 games, considering he played a couple of seasons in the championship with us as well. And look, I think it's a stepping stone for him. He came from Man City on the cheap, massively on the cheap, looking to make a name for himself. He sort of has done that at Fulham, and now he can go and take the next step, hopefully, in his career. And look, I'd say he'd be looking at a higher Premier League team, maybe even like a Brighton, as maybe a backup centre back at Brighton, where you're playing regular European football, or he drops down to maybe go to somewhere like a Leicester and be their starting defender in the Championship, and then come back up from the Championship with Leicester and be a starting Premier League defender. I don't
None of
know
those
exactly what the
strategies
next step
make
is.
sense to me. None of those tactics make sense to me. Because if you think you're better than 10th place Fulham, who've got ambition, successful manager, and bucks to spend, we think, and you played the last, 10 games of the season and did well, doesn't make sense to me.
But remember as well, go on, sorry, Sammy.
Or is it just that he just wants to be the starting guy? Like, is it more so. Just like he wants to play Premier League, and it doesn't matter if he's playing like at like Wolves or something like that. As long as he is the starting guy and no one's taking that position away from him, he doesn't care, and he doesn't like the fact that he essentially has competition, and that kind of stifles him more so than actually egg him on to actually be better.
He's probably an only child. He's got sharing issues.
Wow, Dad, Jesus, come on.
He's not an only child, but he probably thinks that he should be in line for an England call up. And look, I think he actually has the ability to be that kind of player at some point. Maybe Silva
going to Leicester in the Championships ain't going to do that for you.
No,
look,
but
Harry Maguire can get the
call
up.
You need a restart to your career, because I think it's just sort of fallen away a little bit. I do agree he had a good end to the season, but to your point as well of saying, Fulham could be a European team next year. We're not a team who finished 10th anymore. It's a fresh slate at the start of the season,
of course.
And so you just don't know. And so maybe he's looking for something slightly different. Maybe he'll go overseas as well. It wouldn't be overly surprising to see him go to a team in France or a team in Italy, like Smalling and Tomori have done recently. Like,
honestly, I see him going to like Bundesliga or something like that, and then trying to like I see him literally trying to go to like Dortmund or something like that, and it just going horribly wrong, and he can't get in the squad, and then him just getting stressed.
One thing. But I could be completely wrong. One thing about that guy is, I don't know, it just seems like he had a massive attitude. Whenever things were going wrong, he would scowl and blame people and throw his arms up, and I hated that about him, I have to say.
All right, Daddy. Okay, I'm gonna end it with I wish you well, and I'm gonna stop you from going any further into this rabbit hole. Tosin, the That's So Craven podcast loves you. We wish you well, no matter what you decide. Elton's comments do not reflect that of the group.
Yeah, look, I don't know what the next step is for him. But it seems like he's all but out the door. So the main thing now is just picking up as much as we possibly can for Tosin. Trying to get, 10, 12 million for him, something along those lines. And
which we probably will.
And look, we don't have to recoup a massive amount because we only signed him for 2 million. There's a reported future sale fee of 20% that'll go to Man City as well. So if we sell him for 10, we pick up 8 million in the bank, and that goes towards a new player. And as mentioned here by Black, White, and Fred on our live stream as well. Shame to lose Tosin, but I do think he can be replaced. I think Igor from Fiorentina is being lined up to fill that gap, and there are already murmurs of players coming in those defensive positions. So I think we'll see things start to ramp up a little bit as some of these rumours actually become fact over the next week, or maybe not week or so, but I think once we get into mid-July and the team starts going on that pre-season tour, they'll want to have wrapped up a couple of pieces of business, and that will include some of the outgoings. Another outgoing rumour that's worth discussing, João Palhinha. Now, this one's obviously been touted for such a long time now, but it appears West Ham are going to be making their initial approach for Palhinha. Now, that the figure has been touted at 40 million, which is obviously one of those lowball initial offers. But, Dad, let's say you had to accept a bid for Palhinha. What's the minimum that you would accept?
And I'm not even thinking here in terms of, sort of commercial profits on our acquisition of him. I'm thinking in terms of the damage it does to this team, and the spinal damage it does to this team. I'd be wanting 70, 80 million for him, and I know that we wouldn't get it. But that's the sort of money that I'd want to buy two players and roll the dice on two of them.
80 million, minimum for me.
Yeah, I think somewhere in that 70, 80 mark. If Declan Rice is going for 100, and there's obviously the sort of England tax on that, and the fact that you do need English players for registration reasons. But I think his worth to the team is almost worth more than his actual ability to another team. So
at this moment, he's actually probably worth 100 million to this team in terms.
He really is, because if we lost Palhinha, it would just leave such a massive hole that would need to be filled. And as Tony said, as Steve Reynolds on our live stream just chipped in as well and mentioned the fact that Tony Khan came out because it was reported by TalkSport falsely that there was a release clause in Palhinha's contract. Now, I believe that there was a relegation release clause in Palhinha's contract, but seeing as Fulham didn't get relegated, that clause was null and void. Tony Khan, well, I think it was only in the first season, that release clause. And basically from here, Tony's come out on Twitter very clearly and said there is no release clause. And I think in saying that, it's almost sending a bit of a message also saying there is no release clause, and that would be the only reason why we would sell him.
There seems no incentive for him to actually go to West Ham at this stage in his career with what he's doing. I mean, everything that he could potentially achieve there, he could also achieve with us. I know they've just won the Conference League, but they finished, 3 points lower than we did in the table?
More than that, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's why? And also, I'm pretty sure Declan Rice has re-signed, hasn't he?
Say again?
I'm pretty sure Declan Rice has re-signed with West Ham. I know other clubs are still looking.
No.
Are you sure about that?
Rice has said, I want to leave West Ham. I'm not re-signing with West Ham.
All right. Okay. Even still, though, I see no incentive for Palhinha to actually go there. It doesn't make sense to me. Maybe I'm being naive, but I don't really see what is the incentive for him to go there instead of staying with us? Taking myself fully out of that as a diehard Palhinha.
I mean, the big one is he'd get a massive pay rise because they would pay him a lot more, and he would be playing in the Europa League next season. The one thing I will add to that is he left a team playing in the Champions League to come and join Fulham. So I
Yeah.
don't think European football is going to be a massive draw for him.
Yeah.
The massive draw would be if they said we will triple your wage at Fulham. And then
Yeah.
it's just up to Fulham to make sure that we triple his wage to keep him.
And
So
I can't see us not doing that.
yeah, I mean, there would be reasons for him to leave. I don't think it's out of the question because, great players leave teams all the time, especially mid-table teams like Fulham. The big point there is he's not exactly taking a big step up. If it was Liverpool coming in for Palhinha, and I know it's been slightly touted around a little bit that they might be in for Palhinha, I think then it's a slightly different story. But there doesn't seem like there's any incentive for him really to move to West Ham. Apart from money, but again, I think he's happy at Fulham. He's made that fairly clear come the end of the season. So, yeah, look, in our comments on the live stream, we got Black, White, and Fred saying 90 to 100 million. Most people on Twitter sort of saying that 70 plus would need to be offered. And look, I think if we picked up 80 million for Palhinha, that's a pretty good deal. You saw, and the commercial team at Fulham would be licking their lips at that and going, we signed a player for 20 million and in a year we've made a 60 million pound profit on someone. And that money goes back into the transfer kitty as well. And you say to the scouting team, find me 2 more of these guys and we'll sign them. We'll spend 40 million or 50 million and sell them both for 100 million in 2 years' time. Like it is a business at the end of the day, but for Fulham to stay up in the Premier League, I think you need Palhinha at this very moment.
Yeah, we're not self-sustainable yet without him.
And so it feels like it would be commercially a poor decision, even if someone did offer 100 million. It feels like it would be a poor decision to actually let him go.
Well, strategically, it'd be a poor decision because the way you stay up and the way you develop is to grow around a spine and a framework, right? And, for us to sell him would be ripping the heart out of that. And no matter how much money you made, your commercial team could be jumping up and down, but you're probably shooting yourself in the foot or certainly taking a massive risk that you can actually bring someone in to replace him. That works as well for our system and everything that we do. But there isn't a big question here. Isn't the big question here, what makes João happy at Fulham? I think a big part of that is Marco Silva. And we need to be locking Marco Silva down to surely be increasing the likelihood of João Palhinha being happy at Fulham and staying. Because if Marco Silva didn't stay, would you be nervous about João Palhinha staying at Fulham?
I definitely would. I mean, say, for example, we get Brendan Rodgers in, for example. He can't speak Portuguese, so then that's half the side who doesn't understand him.
A bit nervous, but again, yes, the Portuguese thing does help, but these Premier League teams often have 16 different nationalities, and Marco Silva would not be giving his team talks in English and then again in Portuguese to the Portuguese guys. He'd be talking in English 90% of the time. It definitely helps. Would I be worried? I don't think losing a manager would all of a sudden see us lose all of our Portuguese players because he's Portuguese, or Portuguese-speaking players rather. But yeah, they obviously there's a good feeling around the club at the moment, and I think Silva's an integral part of that. So I wouldn't want to lose Silva or any of those players like Mitro, like Willian, like many others. So yeah, look, I think there's part of that I agree with, that we do need to lock Silva down, because I think if Silva stays, it definitely sends a bit of a message out there that this is what we're doing and this is our plan. I'll throw to a question that Steve Reynolds has popped in on the live chat, and I'll add a little bit to it as well. Talking of transfer rumours, controversial, but would you have Carvalho back on loan? And I'll also add in there Sessegnon as well, because Sess has struggled at Tottenham over the last few years, and there's been a few little rumours that Tosin is touted by Tottenham as a player that they want. Um, Sam, I'll throw to you first. Carvalho and Cess, would you take them both back on loan or either?
I wouldn't take Cess back on loan, just pure. I mean, I know he's a really, really brilliant player, but uh, I don't think that would. I don't know. I feel like that would fracture the ecosystem a little bit too much, having him back. I don't know. In my mind, I just don't necessarily see it working, especially with the way that we play. And obviously, we'll compensate and we would make allowances and try to work to have him in like the squad. But I feel like that would just cause more problems. I would actually have also as well. He's been at Spurs for a while, so I feel like that could be probably quite a big hit to his ego to go back to Fulham, and I feel like that wouldn't go down well. Carvalho, I feel that we could actually potentially have him back, rejuvenated, chip on his shoulder from being at Liverpool. You didn't want me, as in like Liverpool didn't want me. I can still play in this club. He would be the immediate backup for Pereira, or just be on rotation with him. He'd get plenty of game time. It would be a much easier transition. I would probably have Carvalho back.
Same to you, Dad, but I'll throw in one extra there as well, with the fact that Moussa Dembele, as in the younger Moussa Dembele, has also said that he won't be renewing his contract, so he's available on a free at the moment. And there's quite a few clubs interested in Dembele. Would you consider any of those three players coming back to Fulham?
I'd consider any of those. Well, I'd certainly consider Sessegnon or Carvalho coming back to Fulham. I would not consider Carvalho coming back on loan.
Sure.
That would be a retrograde step. I love the way Sam said he'd come back with a reinvigorated chip on his shoulder.
Well, like just because
you
like
know what one of those is.
Yeah, but like the Liverpool thing has not worked for him. Like,
I think you meant a vinegar.
Huh?
Yeah. Can you imagine taking him? Can you imagine taking him back? We've sent him off to Liverpool. It hasn't worked for him. We take him back on loan, magically improve him, and then he goes back with a higher value to Liverpool. No, I'm not doing that.
Yeah,
Sessegnon's been at Spurs for quite a while. He's been there for quite a while now.
Four, maybe 5 years.
As an outside, he might be an interesting loan prospect. He'd probably do a job for us, I'd say. Do a really good job for us. But I'd rather have him back if he really wanted to come back and he, Silva convinced him and he really believed that he had a role in our side. I'd love to have him back. I rate him. I think he's great.
In the 3 years that Sessegnon was at Fulham, he made 106 appearances, remembering as well that he debuted as a 16-year-old for Fulham. In the 3 years he's been at Tottenham, he's made 38 appearances.
Yeah, he hasn't been consistent there.
Massively stagnated at Tottenham. 4 seasons he's been there, 56 total appearances. In 3 seasons at Fulham, it was 120 total appearances. So he's played half as much for Tottenham in a year extra than he played in his whole time at Fulham. He did have a bit of a better run this year. He made 17 appearances in the league. But look, I think with both of these guys, I would not take them on loan. I'd take them back as players. I think both of them. I know people arc up a fair bit when I say Sessegnon would be a good left back backup option, and they say he's not a left back, but he has played at left back before, and I think as a backup option, he's more than capable to stand in for a game or two. I'd take him as an option, and yeah, I mean Black, White, and Fred mentions it on the live stream here as well. There's a rumor of Andreas Pereira going to PSG in this summer as well. Taking back someone like Carvalho, it's not the worst option to have him slot in because he's good enough and he's very unhappy at Liverpool.
Yeah.
It is tough for a player to basically...
He was also pretty unhappy at Fulham, and it wasn't that long ago.
I don't think he was unhappy at Fulham. I think he was playing so well, and I think when you've got big clubs coming in for you and interested in signing you, it's hard to turn away. It's hard to ignore it. And I think fair play to him going off to Liverpool. I mean, Harvey Elliott has done a superb job at Liverpool, and I think we all thought this stupid kid going off to Liverpool and taken a massive step in his career and he's way too young and it's too early. And he's turned out to be a really good signing for Liverpool. So, look, I think I'd actually like both of them back, and I'd like Dembele as well as a backup striker. And I think if the option is there,
I
we
want
should
the old
definitely
one.
explore it. Oh, yeah, well, even at Dembele, if he's 45 odd now, I'd still take him. He's
I'll
that
have
good.
him on crutches.
Speaking of Andreas Pereira to PSG, thoughts on that, Sammy?
At PSG, not fully sure how that would work.
They do take random players.
They do take random players as well, but like PSG's in the midst. They must be in the midst of a massive reshuffle because Messi's leaving. Di Maria, is he even still there, or is he retired, or in the process of
not sure,
moving
Mbappe
on?
Mbappe said he's leaving at the end of next season.
Yeah, Neymar hasn't got that much longer in him, so it's a bit of a weird time for PSG, and I'm not necessarily sure if he would thrive in that kind of redevelopment period, or maybe get lost in the shuffle, and then that detriment. There's a lot of egos. Like PSG seems like quite a toxic place outside of money and potentially playing with pretty elite players. I don't really know what the draw would be, aside from saying that you played at PSG at that time period. I don't know. I can't really say I know Andreas Pereira well enough to really know if that would be an area where he would like to be. It's just transfer talk, isn't it? It's so hard to speculate because he's like, I don't know these players intimately. I know them lovingly from afar, you know?
It's the joy of transfer rumors.
Honestly.
Pereira at Fulham just feels right. Not because I'm a Fulham fan. It just seems like it's actually worked for him coming from Man City to us. And he's got all the opportunities. He's our first pick. I think, if anything, he's suffered from not having a really good backup. Not only that can push him, I think he just got exhausted at a few times in the season, and it didn't really go well for him. I think he got a bit burnt. And I think the possibility of playing within an even better squad would actually be exciting for him. I think it would be. So, look, I guess if he was offered enormous amounts of money, that might be difficult for him to refuse. 30 million for us, I don't know that solves huge problems for us, because we need to be spending that sort of money anyway to be buying a partner for him. So if he goes, now we're in for 50, 60, 70 million in that role, and we're rolling the dice on two new players. I wouldn't be doing it. It's too much of a change for us.
If I was Pereira, right, and they'd be selling it to me, they'd be like, "Oh, you'd be playing Champions League with Mbappe," as Black, White, and Fred have said. I'd be kind of going, "Am I actually though?" Because I don't really know where Mbappe stands right now. You'll get to play with. Like, imagine if 3 months ago they were like, "Oh, you got to play with Messi," and now he's at Inter Milan. It's too. That club is way too chaotic. But again, I can't speak for Andreas Pereira. I don't know how he would feel.
Well, PSG have money, so you might not play with Mbappe, but you're going to be playing with some top talent. You're going to win a league title, almost certainly, and you're going to be playing in the Champions League. So there's definitely a draw there. It's just about if he decides that he wants to go do that. And it's probably a conversation with PSG to be had to say, what's my actual role here? Are you signing me as a backup player to sit on the bench, or am I starting every game? Because if I'm starting every game, if I was Pereira, I'd probably be leaving. And I think that would be, most of us would probably go, yep, fair enough. That's a really, it's too good to turn down. And if we signed him for roughly 10 million and we pick up 30 for him a year later, I think you can invest that 30 and make it go a long way in terms of some really good attacking midfielders. Even if it's someone like a Carvalho and comes back for 15 million, I'd take that.
Ooh, I wouldn't swap that.
You wouldn't swap
Even with
Carvalho for Pereira?
no, and even if we banked 15 million by doing it, I wouldn't do that.
No, we banked
You,
30, but oh, okay. You mean banking? Yeah,
yeah.
15. Yeah, look, it's
You
who knows.
think about how absolutely brilliant Pereira was from set pieces. Now there are lots of players who can give you that, but he knows our system and he works for us. And if we could, if we could find another attacking midfielder, not lose him, but find another attacking midfielder that was that gave us something a little different, which allowed Marco Silva to be able to, play some chess even better. But to lose him and have Carvalho, for example, I'd be thinking, who's taking our corners?
You take James Ward-Prowse?
Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah. I'd take James Ward-Prowse totally. I feel like James Ward-Prowse is very much within the conversation of players that we would realistically be in for, right? I mean, I feel like he's pretty good.
It depends. It depends on the money. I think he's probably looking slightly above us, but it depends if there are teams out there willing to put the money towards him. I mean, Crystal Palace will pick up a fair whack for Zaha going out to Saudi Arabia, so they might potentially have the opportunity to bring someone like Ward-Prowse. It's really weird that Wright's Wildlife Exploring Adventures, who are joining in on our live stream, at the exact time,
is that Tom Wright's Wildlife Exploring Adventures?
I don't think so.
Shout out Tom Wright.
At the same time, I actually jumped on to look at a few other players and thought about James Ward-Prowse. So there's options out there. What I'm saying is, I think if you get 30 million for a player who's probably not worth 30 million, no offense to Pereira, but I think he's a 15 to maybe 20 million player. But if you get 30 for him, it opens a lot of doors. Because let's say we have 100 million in the kitty before we sell any players this year, you get 10 mil for Tosin, you get 30 mil for Pereira. All of a sudden, there's a potential for us to have 150 million sitting there in the transfer kitty, and you can get a lot of good players for fractions of that. If we could end up signing, 10 players for 15 million, and all of a sudden you've really strengthened your side. So it's an interesting one, and there's a lot of questions still floating out there. And I think, like I said, this is episode 1 of our transfer rumors in the off season. I think there's a lot more to discuss. But I think what we should do is probably wrap this one up, unless you guys have anything else to discuss on this one.
No, not really. Yeah, no. I was going to talk about a possible need for another centre back, but maybe we won't go there.
Do you know? I feel like that's probably going to be another. If you would like to hear a podcast about that, please let us know. But we're like an hour and 20 in now. Like,
yeah,
there's like it's almost 12 o'clock here for me. I can't start that now. I can't.
Yeah, look, I'll read out a statement that was made by Fulham just recently, and it's literally.
Come on, let's go.
No. We're not going to get into it because we're going to wait for some more information to come out. But Fulham spokesperson today said in a statement, "We are aware of reports emanating from France this morning regarding one of our players, Issa Diop. We are currently liaising with the player's representatives to establish the facts." Now, that doesn't really tell us a huge amount there, but as you said, Sammy, we will definitely have another podcast in the coming days, and in that we will discuss the developing story about Diop and how that's going to affect us going forward. Because, look, I think there's a lot to discuss, but at the moment we just don't know the facts fully, and I think it would be wrong of us to discuss it at this stage before we do find out. So we're expecting to podcast sometime next week. And look, I'm hoping that Fulham have released a statement by then with a bit more information. I'm hoping that we get a bit more information. But as we're recording this, the story literally broke an hour ago. And so there's just no information out there. It's only been reported by the Sun and the Mirror, really, so far. So not overly comfortable going into too much detail when it's still very early days. But we definitely will discuss it in a bit more detail as we get more information. So do make sure you tune into the next episode, which, like I said, hopefully in the next week or so. We're running on a bit of a loose schedule here while we're catching up and watching the Ashes as well at the same time. So
maybe
we'll definitely cover it.
Maybe we should do like a 30-minute standalone or something like that. Let the people know that's what you want. Just a quickie.
Yeah, possibly.
If we can do a quickie on it. If we can do a quickie. Yeah.
But yeah, look, like I said, we will be releasing another episode in the next few days. Thank you, Steve Reynolds, for updating us on the Ashes score there. For anyone interested, England now 6 for 196, the lead of 203. Looks like it's Australia's to wrap up from here.
Yes.
Yeah, do feel free to engage with us on the cricket as well, because we are, Sam excluded, we are a cricketing family as well as a Fulham family. So
I can also
we do enjoy a bit of Ashes banter.
I can talk about a bunch of other things. You don't need to talk to me about cricket. Mine is much broader. We can go into Pokemon, or we could you can just tell me about you. I'm interested, Like, let's talk about your family trauma. Anyway, Jack, send us out.
Well, do make sure as well to follow Sam. He's on Twitter now, finally, at Sam SAMM.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah, I can't even remember what it was, to be honest. I should get that in for like the next podcast. I should have that down. Twitter's a weird place. I genuinely don't really like it there that much, but it's it's good for Fulham news. It's nice to engage with people. There is questionable stuff floating around on there, but you know what? It's nice to be able to say I can be a part of it to an extent. It's better to do than not do, I guess.
So, Sammy, thank you again for joining us tonight. And it's a bit of a late one, and it's time for bed with work tomorrow.
It's late and cold. My heater's actually busted, so I had a cold shower. But you know what? After my cold shower, this was a nice warm hug.
Lovely. I'll take it. And Dad, thanks for joining us tonight. Looking forward to messaging you for the next 3 hours as we watch the cricket until the very wee hours of the morning.
Yep. We were invited to join an Ashes podcast, and as much as I'd love to talk about it, I think I might just explode with exhaustion. But in the absence of that, Jack and I are on like a constant feed at the moment on Ashes chat and combating Bazball. But there you go.
It's yeah, very rough watching from 6 p.m. till 2 a.m. every morning.
Yeah, I just work full time like a normal person, apparently. So
I work full time on top of that. That's the problem. Anyway, guys, thank you very much for joining me tonight.
No, Dad, wrap it up. Wrap it up.
No. I've got another hour to talk about. No, I'm only kidding.
Oh,
I feel like there's some good stuff coming down the line over the next week or so.
I'll give you credit, Dad. I'll give you credit, Dad. I was fully prepared to play some Oscar music for you at any point tonight. You were very concise with your answers, and I appreciate that. This outro is going forever.
Well, brutal how you cut him off during his outro there as well, Sammy.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, guys, let's wrap it up there. Thank you again for joining me, and thanks to everyone who's joined on the live stream. Great to see Ben Wright, first time on the live stream. Thank you for contributing. Black, White, and Fred, Steve Reynolds, and all you others who didn't comment tonight but were still following along. We really appreciate it. Like I said, we'll be releasing more content over the coming weeks, so do keep in touch with us. Feel free to hit us up anytime you see any Fulham news as well. We're always happy to share and always happy to keep pumping Fulham news to all the Fulham fans out there. So thank you again, and come on, you Whites.